The bonfire roared, music pulsed, and 1,000 people partied on the beach. But one man's cruel mistake was about to bring the entire festival to a dead, terrifying silence. The California sun bled gold and crimson across the Pacific horizon, casting long shadows over the Solstice Fest. It was an annual pilgrimage for free spirits, a sprawling celebration of music, art, and the longest day of the year. The air, thick with the scent of salt, sunscreen, and sizzling street tacos from a row of food trucks, vibrated with the mellow chords of an indie band on the main stage. Hundreds of people dotted the sand, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of a colossal bonfire that spat embers into the twilight sky. Near the edge of the crowd, away from the densest throng of dancers, a man sat quietly on a driftwood log. He wore a simple gray hoodie, the hood pulled low, and a worn baseball cap that shadowed his face. To anyone who bothered to look, he was just another face in the crowd, perhaps a man in his 50s seeking a moment of peace. He watched the waves crash with a placid expression, an island of calm in a sea of joyful chaos. At his feet, a magnificent golden retriever lay contentedly, its head resting on its paws. The dog, whose collar tag read Barney, occasionally thumped his tail against the cool sand, his gentle brown eyes mirroring the calm of his owner. This man was Jason Statham. He wasn't here for the fame or the attention, he was here for the anonymity, for a rare evening where he could just be a man with his dog, soaking in the simple beauty of a sunset. He took a sip from a water bottle, the distant music a pleasant backdrop to the rhythmic sigh of the ocean. This fragile peace was shattered by a sound that didn't belong, a guttural, aggressive roar that tore through the festival's chill vibe like a chainsaw through silk. A convoy of motorcycles, chrome glinting menacingly under the festival lights, carved a path through the parking area onto the sand. They were the Viper Skulls, a local biker gang whose reputation for casual violence preceded them. Leading the pack was a man who called himself Razor. He was a caricature of rebellion, clad in greasy, patched leather, with a skull bandana tied around his forehead and a sneer permanently etched onto his face. He killed his engine, the sudden silence somehow more threatening than the noise. His eyes, small and predatory, scanned the crowd not with curiosity, but with contempt. They settled on the quiet corner where Jason and Barney sat. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. He saw not a man enjoying a festival, but a target. An easy one. Razor swung a leg off his bike, his heavy boots sinking into the sand. Two of his lieutenants followed, their presence a dark stain on the vibrant tapestry of the festival. They ambled over, their swagger a deliberate performance of intimidation. The few people nearby instinctively created space, their laughter dying in their throats. Well, what do we have here? Razor's voice was a gravelly rasp. Looks like Grandpa brought his lap dog to the party. He stopped a few feet from Jason, arms crossed over his chest. Jason didn't rise. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent plea to be left alone. He placed a reassuring hand on Barney's back, who had lifted his head, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Not much of a talker, are ya?" one of the bikers snickered. "Maybe he's scared." Jason finally looked up, his eyes, still shadowed by the cap, holding a flat, neutral gaze. "We don't want any trouble," he said, his voice low and calm. "Just enjoying the music." He made a move to stand, intending to guide Barney away and disappear back into the crowd. But Razor wasn't interested in letting them go. He was here to make a point, to assert his dominance over this peaceful gathering. He saw Jason's attempt to leave as weakness. "Trouble?" Razor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "We're just getting started." He took a deliberate step closer, his gaze dropping to the golden retriever. "And what's this?" A fluffy little coward, just like his owner. Barney, sensing the direct threat, let out a low, uncertain whine. He wasn't aggressive, merely anxious. "Shut your mud up," Razor snarled. That was the line. Jason's posture changed. The relaxed slump was gone, replaced by a coiled tension. He stood up slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of his dog. The movement was fluid, economical, and held a silent warning. "That's enough," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Walk away." For a moment, the sheer, unadulterated confidence in Jason's tone seemed to give Razor pause. But the perceived challenge, in front of his men and a growing number of onlookers, was too much for his ego to bear. He had to re-establish control. With a contemptuous sneer, he looked past Jason, lifted his steel-toed boot, and swung it hard into Barney's side. The dog yelped, a sharp cry of pain and shock that cut through the air. He stumbled sideways, whimpering, and scrambled to hide behind Jason's legs. The world seemed to stop. The band's music faded into a distant hum. Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Phones, which had been recording the sunset, now turned to capture the unfolding drama. Jason didn't look at his dog. His focus was locked entirely on Razor. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a glacial cold. It was the look of a predator whose sanctuary had been violated. He slowly pushed the brim of his cap up, revealing his face fully in the firelight. Recognition flickered in the eyes of some onlookers, followed by disbelief. "You," Jason said, his voice devoid of all emotion, a terrifyingly calm whisper. "You just made a mistake." Recognition finally dawned on Razor's face, but it was mixed with arrogance. "Well, look at that. Jason Statham. The movie star. Gonna do some of your fake fighting now?" He laughed, trying to play it off to his crew and the silent, watching crowd. "What are you gonna do? A dramatic monologue?" Jason took a single, deliberate step forward. The sand barely crunched under his feet. "You have 5 seconds to apologize to the dog." The demand was so absurd, so direct, that Razor blinked. Then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. "Apologize? To a dog? You've been in the sun too long, old man." For Jason's voice was as steady as a surgeon's hand. Razor's amusement began to curdle into anger. He was being challenged, publicly. He puffed out his chest. "You think you're tough? You're just an actor. This is the real world." 3. A few people in the crowd were now live-streaming, their phones held up like digital torches. The band had stopped playing entirely. The only sounds were the crackling bonfire and the distant wash of the waves. The tension was a physical thing, a tightening knot in the air. "Listen to me, pretty boy," Razor spat, jabbing a finger in Jason's direction. "You're in my town. My beach. You and your stupid fleabag are here because I allow it." 2. The finality in that single word was chilling. Razor's bravado faltered for a split second. He glanced at his men, seeking reinforcement, then back at the unmoving figure in front of him. He saw no fear, no hesitation. Only a promise. He made a fatal miscalculation, choosing ego over instinct. "What happens at 1, he sneered. "You gonna cry?" 1. The word was barely spoken before Jason moved. It wasn't a wild swing or a telegraphed punch. It was a blur of motion, a masterpiece of biomechanics. He closed the small distance between them in an instant. His left hand shot out, not to strike, but to gently cup the back of Razor's neck, arresting his movement. Simultaneously, Jason's right hand, open-palmed, struck Razor squarely in the solar plexus. It wasn't loud. Just a dull, solid thump. But the effect was devastating. All the air rushed out of Razor's lungs in a choked gasp. His eyes bulged in shock and pain. His tough guy facade crumbled like wet paper. He staggered backward, his legs turning to rubber, and crashed directly into a vendor's large, wheeled cooler filled with ice and cans of soda. The cooler tipped over with a deafening clatter. Ice, water, and dozens of aluminum cans exploded across the sand. Razor landed in the middle of the mess, sputtering and wheezing, clutching his chest, completely incapacitated. The crowd gasped as one. Jason Statham stood over him, not even breathing hard. He calmly lowered his hands to his sides. "That," he said, his voice returning to a normal, conversational tone, "was for the dog." For a few seconds, the only sound was Razor's desperate, ragged gasping as he tried to force air back into his lungs. He was sprawled in a puddle of icy water and rolling soda cans, his leather vest soaked, his dignity stripped away in a single, precise strike. Humiliation burned in his eyes, hotter than the pain in his chest. His two cronies, who had been laughing moments before, were frozen in place, their jaws slack with disbelief. They had seen their leader, a man who ruled through fear, dismantled with effortless ease. You're dead," Razor finally choked out, spitting sand and fury. He scrambled clumsily to his feet, his pride demanding a response. "You have no idea who you messed with." Jason simply watched him, his expression one of mild disappointment, like a teacher dealing with a particularly slow student. "I think I do," he replied evenly. "You're a bully who hurts animals. Now, are we done here?" That question was the final insult. Enraged, Razor reached behind him and unbuckled his heavy leather belt. It was thick, studded with metal, and its buckle was a solid, oversized piece of polished steel. He wrapped the end around his fist, turning the belt into a makeshift flail. "We're done when I say we're done," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Let's see you block this, movie star." He lunged forward, swinging the heavy buckle in a wild, horizontal arc aimed at Jason's head. The crowd cried out, anticipating a brutal impact. But Jason didn't block. He flowed. In a movement so smooth it seemed rehearsed, he dropped his height slightly, the buckle whistling through the air inches above his head. As Razor's arm overextended, Jason stepped inside the swing. He brought his left hand up to trap Razor's wrist, halting the weapon's momentum. With his right hand, he delivered a short, sharp elbow strike to Razor's bicep, causing the biker's fingers to go numb and release the belt. It fell uselessly to the sand. Before Razor could even register that he'd been disarmed, Jason gave a slight push and a quick, almost invisible trip with his foot. It wasn't a dramatic, high-flying kick, it was a simple, brutally effective sweep. Razor's feet went out from under him, and he crashed down onto his back for the second time, the impact knocking the last of his breath out with a hard whump. This time, Jason didn't stand over him. He followed him down, dropping a knee lightly onto Razor's chest to pin him. He wasn't hurting him, merely controlling him. He leaned in close, his voice a low, instructional murmur that only Razor could hear. Lesson 1, never bring a belt to a real fight. Lesson 2, anger makes you sloppy. He picked up the discarded belt from the sand. And lesson 3. He looked Razor dead in the eye, his gaze unwavering. Power isn't for this. He tossed the belt onto Razor's chest. It's for protecting those who can't protect themselves. Class dismissed. Jason stood up, brushing the sand from his knee as if he'd just been tying his shoe. He turned his back on the defeated biker and walked over to Barney, who was now being comforted by a young woman who had seen the whole thing. He knelt, running his hands gently along the dog's ribs, murmuring soft, reassuring words. Barney licked his face, his tail giving a few tentative wags. The spell was broken. The silent crowd erupted into a buzz of conversation and nervous applause. The two remaining bikers, seeing their leader utterly defeated and now the focus of 100 phone cameras, exchanged a panicked look. They hesitated for a moment, then backed away slowly, melting into the darkness before anyone could stop them. They wanted no part of what was coming. Two burly men in bright yellow, Solstice Fest security shirts were now pushing their way through the crowd. They had been on the other side of the bonfire when the commotion started. "What's going on here? Everyone back up," one of them shouted, his hand resting on a large flashlight. They saw Jason kneeling by his dog and the disheveled figure of Razor still lying on the sand, trying to sit up. "He kicked the dog," a dozen voices shouted at once. And that guy, another person added, pointing a shaking finger, is Jason Statham. The security guards froze, their expressions a mixture of confusion and awe. Just then, the flashing blue and red lights of a sheriff's vehicle painted the scene. Two deputies stepped out, their faces grim and professional. They had received multiple 911 calls about a brawl involving a weapon at the festival. The lead deputy, a tall man with a calm demeanor, surveyed the scene, the scattered ice, the discarded belt, the humiliated biker, and the movie star comforting his dog. He walked over to Jason first. "Sir, are you alright? Is your dog injured?" "He'll be okay," Jason said, not taking his eyes off Barney. "Just scared. And bruised." The deputy nodded, then turned his attention to Razor, who was now being helped to his feet by a security guard. "And you? What's your side of the story?" "He assaulted me." Razor whined, pointing a trembling finger at Jason. The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" He turned to the crowd. "Did anyone see what happened?" It was like a dam breaking. A flood of witnesses surged forward, all talking at once, all holding up their phones. "We have it on video," one teenager yelled. "The biker started it. He kicked the poor dog for no reason." The deputy held up a hand for calm. All right. One at a time." He spent the next 5 minutes listening to a handful of coherent accounts, all of which told the same story. He glanced at the footage on one of the phones, which clearly showed Razor's unprovoked attack and Jason's controlled, defensive response. He sighed and walked back to Razor. "Sir, you're under arrest for animal cruelty, disorderly conduct, and assault with a deadly weapon." "A weapon? He's the one who attacked me." Razor protested, his voice shrill. "Your belt, which you swung at his head," the deputy said flatly, as his partner pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Multiple witnesses, multiple videos. You have the right to remain silent." As they cuffed him, Razor's face contorted with the final, bitter sting of public humiliation. He wasn't just beaten, he was a joke. The tough biker, arrested for kicking a dog and getting schooled by a movie star in front of everyone. He was led away, a chorus of jeers and insults following him into the darkness. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the story was already a viral phenomenon. The hashtag Statham Saves Dog was trending worldwide. Grainy cell phone videos of the confrontation were everywhere, racking up millions of views on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. News outlets from TMZ to the BBC had picked up the story. The narrative was irresistible, a beloved action hero, in a real-life display of his on-screen persona, defending his loyal dog from a cartoonish villain. In a sterile county jail cell, Razor made his one phone call. He didn't call a lawyer, he called the chapter president of a much larger, more dangerous motorcycle club he aspired to join. "You're not gonna believe what happened," he began, his voice a pathetic whine. "I already saw it," the voice on the other end replied, cold as ice. "It's on every damn website. You got taken down by an actor after you kicked a dog. You're a laughingstock. You've embarrassed us all. Lose this number." The line went dead. Razor slumped onto the cot, the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. He hadn't just been arrested, he'd been exiled from the only world that ever gave him a sense of power. A few days later, the media frenzy had died down. On a quiet, misty morning, Jason and Barney were back on the same stretch of beach. The remnants of the festival were gone, and the shore was empty, save for a few seagulls. Barney, fully recovered, chased the receding waves with joyful abandon, his bark echoing in the calm air. Jason watched him, a small, genuine smile on his face. He threw a tennis ball, and Barney sprinted after it, a golden blur against the gray sand. The incident hadn't been about proving a point or being a hero. It was simpler than that. It was about a fundamental line that had been crossed. It was about a duty to protect an innocent creature that depended on him. He thought about the nature of strength. The world was full of men like Razor, who confused cruelty with power and noise with authority. They built their identities on fear because they had nothing else. But true strength, he mused, wasn't about the ability to inflict pain. It was about the willingness to absorb it, to stand in the way of it, to shield the vulnerable from it. It was quiet, it was controlled, and it only showed itself when it was absolutely necessary. As Barney trotted back, ball in mouth, and dropped it at his feet, Jason knelt and ruffled the dog's soft fur. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy. What would you have done in that situation?" Real strength isn't about starting fights, it's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's comment respect for everyone who stands up for the innocent. If you were moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that matters.